Imagine losing everything in a single night. Your home, your family's approval, even the life you thought you knew. That was Vesper's world. Shoved into the rain, abandoned, humiliated, and told she had nothing left. But what if everything you believed was true was actually a lie? What if the people who betrayed you were only pawns in a far bigger plan, one crafted in secret by the person you loved most? Vesper's journey takes her from despair on a muddy bus stop to the skies of London into a world of unimaginable wealth, power, and inheritance she never dreamed of. Every step she thought was punishment was actually preparation. And now, the very people who laughed at her are about to face the consequences of their greed. This is not just a story of revenge, it's a story of resilience, love, and the ultimate triumph. The cold fluorescent light of the airport flickered as Vesper approached the counter, gripping her small purse like a lifeline. She could barely speak, her throat dry, every muscle tense. The ticket had been booked under her name, first class, one way, no luggage, every red flag for suspicion. But she had no choice. She was running on hope and a message she barely understood. Everything is arranged. We are waiting for you in London. The employee typed quickly, glancing at Vesper like she was some unsolvable puzzle. In the name of Mrs. Vesper Vance. Flight to London, first class, departure at 6:30. No checked luggage? Vesper nodded, pointing to the purse she held tightly. The worker's expression hardened, a mixture of confusion and concern. A one-way ticket, first class, no luggage. It was the perfect storm to trigger every security alarm. A middle-aged man in a tailored suit appeared, exuding authority. He spoke briefly to the employee, reviewing the screen before looking at Vesper. Good morning, ma'am. Your reservation is confirmed, fully paid. It's unusual, but we can process you. Vesper forced a nod. My late husband, arranged everything. It's an emergency. I must go. The man hesitated, studying her. Perhaps he saw the grief in her eyes, perhaps a note in the system. Finally, he nodded. Process the boarding. The thick boarding pass felt heavy in her hand. Gate F8. VIP lounge access. Vesper passed through security, watched by suspicious agents who nonetheless stamped her passport. She had made it. The lounge was a different world. Soft lights, wide leather chairs, people immersed in quiet conversation or laptops. Vesper ducked into the restroom, locking the door behind her. The woman in the mirror was a stranger, pale, swollen eyes, disheveled head wrap, but she washed her face, removed mud from her dress, and tried to reclaim a fragment of herself. The final boarding call echoed. Vesper handed over her pass and walked down the jet bridge, past economy passengers, toward the first-class cabin. The flight attendant smiled warmly. Good morning, Mrs. Vance. Your seat is 1A. The private suite was astonishing. A leather armchair that converted into a bed, a giant screen, a small closet. 12 hours ago, she had been on a diesel-scented bus. Now, she occupied a luxury suite worth more than her wildest imagination. She requested only water as the plane took off, gripping the armrests as London approached across the clouds. Sleep eluded her. Memories of laughter and betrayal swirled in her mind. The will, the humiliation, the houses, the cars, the family who had dismissed her, they might not have been what they seemed. Could Cassius have prepared all this? Was London truly a place of refuge or of danger? Hours later, the plane landed at Heathrow. Cold air met her thin dress, and she followed the signs to passport control. The agent glanced at her one-way ticket and no luggage, typed some notes, and stamped her entry. Welcome to the United Kingdom. She walked through the terminal, alone, overwhelmed. Crowds, signs, shouts, and laughter surrounded her. Her heart raced. Then, in the back of the lobby, she saw him, a tall, silver-haired man holding a black tablet that read clearly, Mrs. Vesper Vance. Their eyes met. Recognition, respect. He spoke 7 words that froze her blood. Welcome, madam. This is your true inheritance. Vesper took a hesitant step forward, trembling. The journey she thought was despair had only just begun. Vesper's knees felt weak as she followed Mr. Sterling through the airport. His calm, measured steps contrasted sharply with the storm raging in her mind. She had been abandoned, humiliated, and left to face the world alone. And now, somehow, she was being led to the life her late husband had prepared in secret. This all belongs to me? She whispered, hardly daring to breathe. Yes, madam, Sterling replied gently. Every asset, every property, every account. You are now the sole owner of DL Global Holdings. Cassius built this for you. Every step of the plan was designed to protect you and to ensure your inheritance reached you safely. They reached a black Rolls-Royce, its engine purring softly. A uniformed chauffeur opened the rear door, revealing beige leather interiors so pristine and luxurious it made her heart ache with disbelief. Vesper slid inside, still clutching her purse like a lifeline. Where are we going? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. To your new home, Sterling said, offering her bag. A penthouse purchased in your name 6 months ago. Every detail has been prepared to make you comfortable, secure, and ready for what comes next. The car glided silently through London's rainy streets. Vesper pressed her forehead to the glass, letting the city blur into streaks of gray and gold. Just days ago, she had been kicked out of a house, soaked in mud, forced to ride a bus with strangers. Now, she was about to enter a world of unimaginable wealth and power, meticulously orchestrated by the man she loved and lost. The sedan stopped in front of a towering glass building. The lobby, private and silent, smelled faintly of polished marble and fresh flowers. Sterling led her to an elevator with no visible buttons. The chauffeur swiped a key card, and the doors opened directly into a spacious living room. Vesper stepped inside, gasping. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a panoramic view of London. The furniture was minimalist, elegant, and undeniably expensive. This is mine? She whispered. Yes, madam. All of it, Sterling confirmed. And there is more. Come, I need to show you something important. He led her to a sleek office within the penthouse. On the desk sat a laptop with a video file ready to play. Cassius's face filled the screen, a face pale and marked by illness, but with the same intensity that had always held her captive. My Vesper, his voice rasped. If you are watching this, it means the plan worked. You are safe in London, and I am no longer with you. Forgive me for what you think I did wrong. Tears blurred Vesper's vision as she listened. Each word, each pause, each flicker of his gaze carried a lifetime of love and careful planning. He explained the deception of the will, the mansion, the cars, the Solaris Group, all carefully staged to mislead his family. The truth was hidden. DL Global Holdings, the international empire he had built, was hers. The apparent generosity to his mother and sister was a ruse. They were left with nothing, their victory hollow and temporary. Vesper's mind raced. Every humiliation, every tear shed, every moment of despair. Cassius had anticipated it all. He had created a path through pain to lead her to safety, power, and control over her destiny. The house in Willow Creek wasn't a punishment, he continued. It was a shelter, a transit point. Every detail was arranged so that you could find your way to London, follow the clues, and claim your inheritance. DL Global Holdings is yours. I've made sure you are strong enough to step into this life. You are the strongest woman I know, Vesper. Trust Mr. Sterling. He will guide you. Vesper fell silent, overwhelmed by grief, love, and disbelief. She had been a pawn, a widow, a victim, and now she was the heir to a global empire. She pressed her hand to her chest, trying to steady the rush of emotions threatening to drown her. Sterling guided her to the master bedroom, where clothes, shoes, and essentials awaited, carefully chosen by Cassius. A warm bath, soft fabrics, and gentle lighting awaited her. She touched the garments, the silk and cotton whispering promises of a life she had never imagined. Hours passed. She washed away the remnants of the rain, the mud, the humiliation. She dressed in a simple, elegant outfit and returned to the windows, looking out over the sprawling city. The weight of her old life, the fear and the grief, somehow, all of it had been transformed into the foundation of her new reality. Later, Sterling returned, closing the elevator doors behind him. He observed her for a long moment, seeing the shift in her posture, the subtle steadiness in her gaze. "Are you ready, madam?" he asked. Vesper took a deep breath, straightened her back, and nodded. "What is the first thing I must do?" "First," Sterling said, smiling gently, "you rest and eat. Jet lag is unforgiving. Tomorrow, we will review your assets. The day after, you will preside over your first board meeting as the CEO of DL Global Holdings. Welcome to your new life, Mrs. Vesper." For the first time since her husband's death, Vesper allowed herself a faint, quiet smile, a mix of acceptance and determination. The path from despair to power had only just begun. The screen flickered, and Vesper sat before the laptop, the image of Cassius imprinted in her mind. His face, pale and marked by illness, seemed to hold both sorrow and pride. Every word he had recorded was a roadmap, painful yet precise, for her journey from a broken widow to a powerful leader. "My Vesper," he said softly, "I built this for you, not just to survive, but to thrive. Everything you see, every asset, every opportunity is yours. I only ask that you live fully, bravely, and with intelligence." Vesper swallowed hard, the lump in her throat resisting words. She pressed her hand against the desk, grounding herself. She had spent so long feeling powerless, disregarded, humiliated. Now, for the first time, she realized the scope of the life awaiting her, a global empire, a carefully prepared plan, and a world that could no longer oppress her. Cassius's voice continued, explaining the careful orchestration of his will. His mother and sister had been handed hollow victories, a mansion, a few cars, and the illusion of wealth. In reality, the debts, the legal obligations, and the empty company would collapse around them. Meanwhile, Vesper's inheritance, DL Global Holdings, accounts in Switzerland, properties across Europe, was protected, intact, and waiting for her. She closed her eyes, letting the tears flow freely. Anger, grief, love, and admiration mingled in a storm she had no words for. Each detail of Cassius's plan revealed his understanding of human nature, his foresight, and the depth of his love for her. "You must understand," he said, "my mother and sister are clever in their greed, but predictable. The plan only worked if they believed you were powerless, insignificant, humiliated. If they had known the truth, they would have pursued you relentlessly. Now, they are trapped in the consequences of their own choices, and you are free." Vesper opened her eyes, staring at the city outside the penthouse window. The London skyline stretched endlessly, a world of opportunity shimmering beneath gray clouds. She felt a strange combination of grief for the husband she had lost and exhilaration for the woman she was about to become. Sterling returned quietly, watching her from the doorway. He didn't interrupt, understanding the gravity of the moment. "Whenever you are ready," he said softly, "you will step into the life Cassius built. I will guide you every step of the way. No one else has a claim on what is yours." She nodded, her fingers still trembling. Where do I even begin? First, he said, we ensure you are rested and nourished. Then, we will go through every asset, every account. In a few days, you will preside over your first board meeting as the official CEO of DL Global Holdings. Cassius prepared you for this, even if you didn't realize it yet. Vesper's hands brushed the silk scarf around her neck, feeling the faint scent of Cassius's cologne lingering from the carefully packed belongings. Each piece of clothing, each document, each note had been chosen with intent. She realized the depth of his foresight. He had accounted for every possible challenge she could face, every emotion she might feel. That evening, she took a warm bath, letting the water wash away the remnants of mud, rain, and the psychological weight of the past week. She dressed in fresh clothes, her reflection in the mirror revealing a woman transformed, not just in appearance, but in presence. Her eyes, though swollen from crying, were sharper, clearer, resolute. Sterling had already arranged a simple yet elegant dinner. The table was set with care, modest in comparison to the penthouse's grandeur, but purposeful. Every bite she took reminded her that she was no longer the powerless widow who had boarded that bus weeks ago. She was a woman reclaiming her destiny. After dinner, she returned to the laptop to watch the rest of Cassius's message. He spoke of his life in secret, his construction of DL Global Holdings, and the careful diversion of assets from the Solaris Group. Every detail clarified the layers of deception she had endured and the intelligence with which he had safeguarded her future. By the time she turned off the laptop, night had settled over London. The city lights reflected in her eyes, symbolizing both the distance she had traveled and the new horizon she was about to conquer. She knew that her first challenge would be understanding the vast network of businesses, employees, and investments her husband had built. But she also knew she was not alone. Sterling was there, and Cassius's plan had given her every tool she needed to succeed. Vesper stepped to the floor-to-ceiling windows and inhaled deeply. The pain of her past still lingered, but now it was framed by the potential of her future. She thought of the humiliation, the cold bus ride, the empty house in Willow Creek, and realized that every hardship had been a prelude to this moment of empowerment. For the first time since Cassius's death, she felt a spark of hope, courage, and clarity. She wasn't just surviving. She was stepping into a life carefully orchestrated for her triumph. And as she stood there, looking at London's lights, she whispered to herself, "Yes, I am ready." The next morning, London greeted Vesper with gray skies and a gentle drizzle, a city waking slowly beneath the glass walls of her new penthouse. She stood by the enormous windows, letting the sounds of distant traffic and morning announcements fill the room. Her reflection in the glass revealed a woman no longer fragile, no longer adrift, but poised on the threshold of a life that demanded courage, intelligence, and decisiveness. Sterling appeared quietly behind her. "Breakfast is ready, madam," he said, his tone calm, measured. "Afterward, we can begin reviewing your assets and the structure of DL Global Holdings." Vesper turned and gave him a small nod. "I'm ready," she said, her voice firmer than she expected. The breakfast was modest but carefully arranged. Fresh fruits, soft pastries, herbal tea. She ate slowly, letting the routine of nourishment anchor her scattered thoughts. Each bite reminded her that she was no longer a passenger in life, but the driver, navigating a path laid meticulously by the man she had loved. After breakfast, Sterling led her into a sleek office adjacent to the living room. A large, polished desk bore multiple devices, a laptop, a tablet, and neatly stacked folders. Behind the desk, a wall-mounted screen displayed a world map dotted with the locations of DL Global Holdings properties, subsidiaries, and ongoing projects. "Everything here belongs to you," Sterling said, gesturing to the screen. Your husband left detailed instructions and guides for each company, investment, and legal procedure. Over the next few days, I will help you understand the structure, the finances, and the responsibilities. Vesper took a deep breath and moved closer. Each folder she touched felt like a key to a world she had only glimpsed before. The names of banks, companies, and investment funds flowed across her mind like a foreign language, but she was determined to learn. Determination replaced fear. Confusion began to give way to focus. Let's start with the basics, Sterling continued. DL Global Holdings is the parent company. Every subsidiary, every property, every account, both in Europe and elsewhere, is under its control. Your mother-in-law and sister-in-law hold nothing of real value anymore. That house, those cars, the Solaris Group, they are all tied to liabilities they cannot repay. Vesper's lips pressed together. A quiet satisfaction stirred within her, tempered by a sense of gravity. The humiliation she had endured was now balanced with justice, meticulously calculated and executed by the only man who had truly understood her worth. Sterling pulled up the financial dashboard on the screen. Here you see active investments, ongoing acquisitions, and cash flows. Your role is to oversee strategic decisions. You don't need to memorize every number. You need to understand the system, trust your instincts, and use your judgment. The details can be learned over time. Vesper nodded, taking notes. The pages of folders, graphs, and spreadsheets once intimidating now seemed like instruments to shape a future she had never dared to imagine. Every decision she made would honor Cassius's legacy and prove to herself and the world that she was capable. Hours passed, the penthouse quiet except for the occasional hum of the elevator or distant traffic. Sterling guided her through subsidiaries, teaching her how to read balance sheets, interpret investments, and communicate with senior managers. Vesper asked questions, sometimes simple, sometimes complex, and each answer built her confidence. By midday, she had begun to see herself not as a victim, but as a leader. As the sun dipped behind London's skyline, casting muted reflections across the penthouse, Sterling leaned back and said, "You are doing well, madam. In just a few days, you will preside over your first board meeting. That will be the true test, but I have no doubt you will handle it with intelligence and poise." Vesper let the words settle. Her mind traveled back to the past, the bus terminal, the rain, the empty house, the tears, and the humiliation. Every trial had been a stepping stone, every setback a lesson in resilience. Now the path before her stretched wide and illuminated by possibilities she had never allowed herself to see. She turned to the windows once more, looking down at the bustling city below. The lights of London flickered like stars, distant yet accessible. The power she now wielded was real, tangible, and entirely hers. The fear, grief, and humiliation of the past no longer defined her. Vesper had crossed the threshold from survival to authority, from invisibility to influence. Sterling's voice broke her reverie. "Dinner will be served shortly, madam. Rest tonight. Tomorrow, we begin your preparation for the board meeting. You will see the full scope of DL Global Holdings operations and begin shaping your vision for its future." Vesper smiled faintly, the first truly serene smile she had worn in weeks. "I'm ready," she whispered to herself, and this time she meant it. Not a statement of compliance, but a declaration of ownership, strength, and determination. The city stretched endlessly, and so did her possibilities. For the first time in her life, Vesper felt that she was no longer at the mercy of others. She was in command. She was a widow, yes, but also a CEO, a leader, a woman who had survived everything and was finally free to shape her destiny. The morning arrived with a soft London drizzle, the streets glistening under the muted light. Vesper felt the weight of anticipation press against her chest as she entered the private office in her penthouse. Today was the day she would see the full extent of her inheritance, the empire Cassius had built for her, and begin the journey to lead it. Sterling was already at the desk, reviewing documents with meticulous care. He looked up and offered a slight smile. "Good morning, madam. I hope you slept well. Today, we start with a complete overview of DL Global Holdings, its subsidiaries, assets, ongoing projects, and pending acquisitions. By the end of the day, you will understand how the entire structure operates." Vesper took a deep breath, trying to steady the nervous flutter in her stomach. "I'm ready," she said, her voice calm but resolute. She had survived humiliation, fear, and grief. She could survive this too. Sterling began with a concise introduction to the company's framework. DL Global Holdings is the parent entity, and under it are multiple subsidiaries in Europe, Asia, and North America. Each subsidiary operates semi-independently, but all reports, financial statements, and key decisions ultimately flow to you. Think of it as a living network. Your role is to guide its growth and make strategic decisions. He showed her the first folder, a summary of investments in Southeast Asia, specifically in renewable energy projects. These are long-term investments. They align with philanthropic goals your husband valued and are financially sound. Your primary concern will be ensuring operations continue efficiently and ethically. The local managers are competent, but they will seek your guidance for major strategic moves. Vesper leaned forward, studying the graphs and projections. The numbers were staggering. The scale of responsibility was immense, yet a strange clarity settled over her. Each investment, each subsidiary, was a puzzle piece of a world she had never seen, now placed entirely in her hands. Over the next several hours, Sterling guided her through property holdings, luxury assets, bank accounts, and legal agreements. She asked questions, often simple, sometimes complex. Sterling answered each with patience and precision, ensuring she understood not only the what, but the why behind each decision. As they moved to the company's European branches, Vesper realized the meticulous care Cassius had taken to protect her. Every document was clear, every plan had contingencies, and every step was designed to keep her safe while providing control over the empire he had built. She felt both awe and gratitude, a swelling mix of emotions that made her chest ache. Lunch arrived, quietly set by the penthouse staff. Vesper ate while reviewing correspondence and emails, each message a reminder of the power and responsibility she now held. The messages ranged from business proposals to updates on ongoing projects, each requiring careful attention. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to marvel at the fact that she was no longer merely a widow grieving in isolation. She was a woman entrusted with immense authority. After lunch, Sterling introduced her to the concept of corporate governance. Your first board meeting is scheduled for the day after tomorrow. Today, we will go over your role as CEO, decision-making protocols, and how to communicate with your directors and managers effectively. It's essential that you command respect and clarity without intimidation. Vesper listened intently. She imagined herself standing at the head of a long table, executives from multiple continents seated before her. She pictured their faces, their expectations, and the weight of responsibility. Yet, for the first time, fear was replaced by a quiet confidence. She could do this. She would do this. Sterling concluded the session with a practical exercise. He presented hypothetical scenarios, investment crises, unexpected market shifts, and internal disputes, and asked Vesper how she would respond. At first, hesitation colored her answers, but with guidance and reflection, she began to respond with decisiveness, weighing risks, understanding nuances, and asserting judgment. By late afternoon, the initial sessions concluded. Vesper felt the exhaustion of mental exertion, but also the thrill of empowerment. She was no longer the woman on a muddy bus, no longer the helpless widow expelled from a house that was never truly hers. She was a leader, standing at the threshold of a life defined not by fear, but by opportunity and strength. Sterling looked at her, satisfaction evident in his eyes. You are progressing faster than I anticipated, madam. By tomorrow, we will review the operational teams in detail, and then you will preside over your first board meeting. Remember, knowledge is power, but confidence and clarity are the keys to leadership. Vesper took a deep breath, gazing once more at the London skyline. The city stretched endlessly, a reminder of the vast possibilities now open to her. Each building reflected not just her literal view, but the metaphorical horizon of her new life. She had endured humiliation, loss, and betrayal. Now she was ready to embrace her destiny, not as a victim, but as a CEO, a widow empowered, a woman who had survived everything and was prepared to rise above it all. As the evening settled over London, Vesper allowed herself a quiet moment of reflection. The path had been harsh, filled with tears and trials, but every hardship had prepared her for this. A life where she was no longer defined by the cruelty of others, but by the courage and strength she had discovered within herself. The morning light poured through the glass walls of the penthouse, illuminating Vesper's sleek navy suit. Today was her first board meeting as CEO of DL Global Holdings, and a mix of nerves and determination filled her. Sterling had prepared her well, but nothing could replace the feeling of stepping into a room where dozens of senior executives waited, each representing a branch, a project, or a region of the vast empire Cassius had left her. The elevator descended silently into the company's private boardroom. Vesper's reflection in the glass walls showed a woman transformed, poised, attentive, and commanding. She took a deep breath and stepped in, Sterling following quietly behind. The room was long, with a dark wood table polished to perfection. Executives of diverse nationalities sat in calculated order, laptops open, eyes watching her arrival. Some were skeptical, others curious, but all were aware that the widow of Cassius Vance now held the reins of power. "Good morning, madam," Sterling whispered. "You are ready." Vesper nodded, holding herself tall. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We have critical discussions today regarding ongoing projects, acquisitions, and strategic investments. Let's proceed." The first topic was a Southeast Asian renewable energy project that had stalled due to regulatory delays. Executives presented reports, projections, and obstacles, expecting questions and perhaps confusion. But Vesper listened, analyzed the data, and calmly proposed solutions. Relocate resources, adjust timelines, and open dialogue with local authorities. Her recommendations were precise, informed, and immediately actionable. A few heads turned, impressed by her clarity. Next came a European property acquisition that required careful financing. Vesper studied the spreadsheet Sterling had reviewed with her the day before. She asked about liabilities, risk exposure, and long-term returns. Then she made her decision, explaining the reasoning behind each step. Executives who initially doubted her ability to understand complex finance were now nodding. She spoke with authority, without arrogance, demonstrating both empathy for stakeholders and firmness in decision-making. During the meeting, Sterling quietly handed her notes when necessary, but let her take the lead. Each question from directors, each challenge, was met with thoughtful answers. She was learning the balance between caution and boldness, authority and approachability. Halfway through the meeting, a crisis alert arrived on the conference system. A supplier in Southeast Asia had reported a logistical delay that could halt production. Vesper immediately instructed the regional manager to communicate alternatives, expedite shipping, and maintain customer relations. She coordinated multiple teams with composure. By the end of the discussion, what could have become a costly disaster was already under control. The executives glanced at one another, silently acknowledging that the new CEO was not just capable, she was strategic and resilient. By mid-afternoon, the board moved to discuss financial restructuring and potential acquisitions in emerging markets. Vesper guided the conversation, weighing the benefits against risks, asking probing questions, and requesting detailed analysis before approving any decisions. Each choice reflected both the foresight Cassius had instilled in her and the independent judgment she was now cultivating. Sterling observed silently, satisfaction clear in his eyes. This was exactly what Cassius had envisioned. A widow, transformed into a leader capable of not only maintaining the empire he built, but expanding it intelligently and ethically. Finally, the meeting concluded. Vesper looked around the room, seeing the respect now evident in the executives' expressions. They no longer saw a widow, but a CEO who commanded knowledge, authority, and vision. The quiet pride in her chest was tempered by the awareness of responsibility, yet she felt exhilarated. She had stepped fully into her role. As she returned to her penthouse, Vesper allowed herself a brief smile in the mirror. The city below seemed alive with endless possibilities. She was no longer defined by grief, by humiliation, or by the cruelty of her in-laws. She was a woman of power, intellect, and resilience, standing firmly in the center of her destiny. Sterling joined her in the penthouse office. "Impressive work today, madam. You handled every situation with intelligence and grace." Cassius would have been immensely proud. Vesper exhaled, letting the tension leave her shoulders. "Thank you, Sterling. I feel capable, but also aware of how much I still need to learn." "Learning never ends, madam, but today you've proven something essential. You have the courage to lead and the heart to protect the legacy left for you. That is more than enough to begin." As evening fell over London, Vesper gazed out at the skyline, the river reflecting the golden glow of the city lights. She felt a mixture of reverence, empowerment, and determination. Each challenge, each lesson, was a step toward mastering her new life, a life that had been painstakingly prepared for her, yet one she now owned entirely. In the quiet of her penthouse, with the city buzzing far below, Vesper allowed herself a moment of private triumph. She had survived humiliation, loss, and betrayal. She had honored Cassius's memory and fulfilled his plan, and she had taken the first decisive step into a future defined not by fear, but by her own strength, intelligence, and courage. The following morning, Vesper awoke to the soft hum of London, the city alive beneath her panoramic windows. Today marked the start of her international initiatives, an opportunity to solidify her role as CEO of DL Global Holdings and demonstrate that she was no longer a passive inheritor, but a strategic leader in her own right. After breakfast, Sterling arrived with a meticulously organized briefing. "Madam, our agenda includes expanding operations in Europe and Asia, reviewing our subsidiaries, and preparing negotiations with key investors in the United States," he said, placing files neatly on the polished desk. Vesper nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also an unfamiliar thrill. This was her life now, and she intended to master it. The first call connected her with the European division. Executives from Paris, Berlin, and Zurich spoke confidently about projects ranging from sustainable energy to technological infrastructure. Vesper listened, absorbing every detail, and when she spoke, her voice carried authority without condescension. She questioned timelines, suggested optimizations, and requested risk assessments. Even the most senior managers paused, impressed by her understanding and composure. Next, she engaged with her Asian teams. From Singapore, Hong Kong, and Bangkok, her project managers presented their reports. Production delays, supply chain challenges, and regulatory obstacles were discussed. Vesper's approach was firm yet empathetic. "We cannot allow these delays to affect our commitment to local communities," she reminded them. "Efficiency must align with ethics. Review the logistics and propose alternatives within 24 hours." Sterling observed, quietly proud, as Vesper navigated the virtual meetings with the precision of a seasoned executive. She had learned to balance urgency with diplomacy, assertiveness with collaboration, She was no longer reacting to situations. She was anticipating them. By midday, Vesper turned her attention to financial restructuring. The acquisition of a renewable energy plant in Vietnam had been approved, but she wanted a deeper understanding. She studied contracts, assessed potential returns, and evaluated the long-term strategic benefits. When she asked questions, Sterling supplied concise explanations, but she made the final decisions, signing documents digitally, her signature now an emblem of authority rather than mere formality. A brief break allowed her a moment of reflection. From the window, London stretched endlessly. She thought back to the mud-stained bus, the ruined house, the humiliation imposed by her in-laws. Every moment of suffering had been a prelude to this, an education in resilience, patience, and strategy. The tears she had shed for Cassius, for her humiliation, had transformed into determination. The afternoon brought a call from her legal teams in the United States. They detailed ongoing litigation against former executives and the final steps to transfer control of the Solaris Group properties. Vesper listened carefully. Ensure all communications remain professional. Leverage our legal advantages, but avoid unnecessary conflict, she instructed. We win not by vengeance, but through preparation, foresight, and precision. Then came the moment she had been waiting for, the first board meeting for DL Global Holdings International Expansion. As she entered the conference room, the executives greeted her with professional deference. Vesper addressed the room confidently, outlining her vision: sustainable growth, ethical practices, and the strategic acquisition of undervalued assets. She emphasized not only profit, but also the positive societal impact of her decisions. During discussions, she handled challenges gracefully. Questions about liability, project feasibility, and cultural concerns were met with informed responses. She delegated responsibility appropriately, allowing experts to manage technical details while retaining strategic oversight. By the end of the meeting, the executives were aligned, impressed, and motivated. Vesper had not only maintained control, but inspired trust and respect. After the meeting, Sterling approached. "Madam, you've handled today with remarkable clarity. Your late husband would be proud, not just of what you inherited, but of the leader you've become." Vesper smiled faintly, acknowledging the praise while feeling the truth of her own growth. She had gone from a grieving widow to the captain of an empire, navigating challenges, asserting authority, and embracing her destiny. The penthouse no longer felt like a fortress built for protection. It was now her command center, a space where vision and action converged. As evening descended, she reviewed the day's accomplishments. Investments secured, teams motivated, and strategic initiatives set in motion. The transformation was complete. The woman who had boarded a plane in despair had returned to London as a force to be reckoned with. Her grief had been refined into purpose, her loss into opportunity. Before retiring for the night, Vesper stood by the window, the Thames glimmering below. She touched the locket around her neck, a symbol of love, loss, and now empowerment. Her reflection showed a determined woman, no longer defined by past misfortune, but by the strength and intelligence she had cultivated. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, she felt entirely capable of shaping her own destiny. London sparkled below, unaware of the empire it cradled. But Vesper did not need acknowledgement. Her purpose was clear, her path illuminated, and as she prepared for the days ahead, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would lead DL Global Holdings not only to survive, but to thrive, honoring Cassius's vision while crafting her own legacy. The following morning, Vesper awoke to a sense of calm determination. She no longer felt the weight of fear or helplessness. She had inherited not only an empire, but the confidence to command it. Sterling entered, carrying the latest reports on her global holdings. Madam, we can begin reviewing the consolidation plan for Europe and Asia, he said. Vesper nodded, ready to tackle the final steps of her transformation from widow to CEO. Her first call was with the team handling the transition of the Solaris Group in the United States. Genevieve and Serafina had been reduced to a shadow of their former selves, but the legal documents confirming the repossession of their assets were finalized. Vesper felt neither anger nor satisfaction. Justice, she realized, did not require revenge. It simply needed to be precise and impartial. Next, she addressed her international operations. From renewable energy projects in Southeast Asia to property acquisitions in Europe, every decision had to align with long-term strategy and ethical responsibility. Vesper asked sharp questions, analyzed risks, and approved initiatives with the poise of a leader who understood the stakes. Even seasoned executives marveled at her clarity, foresight, and decisiveness. By midday, she reviewed the letters and emails arriving from investors, partners, and employees worldwide. Each message was an opportunity to communicate her vision, an empire that thrived on innovation, integrity, and social impact. She responded personally where appropriate, reinforcing the impression that she was an engaged, capable leader, not a figurehead. Sterling guided her through the final financial adjustments. Madam, we are finalizing the last steps to consolidate DL Global Holdings' portfolio. Once complete, all subsidiaries, accounts, and properties will be fully under your authority. Vesper absorbed every detail, ensuring she understood the mechanics, not just the outcomes. Knowledge, she realized, was the ultimate tool of empowerment. The day culminated in her first official board meeting. The boardroom was filled with international executives, advisors, and legal counsel. Vesper took her place at the head of the table, her posture confident, her gaze steady. Sterling, seated beside her, offered a reassuring nod. Ladies and gentlemen, Vesper began, her voice firm yet approachable, today marks the beginning of a new chapter for DL Global Holdings. Our mission is not only to grow profitably, but to contribute meaningfully to every community we touch. Each project we undertake will reflect both innovation and integrity. She outlined strategic initiatives, reviewed current operations, and introduced new priorities for corporate responsibility. Questions arose about financial risk, operational logistics, and cultural challenges in international markets. Vesper answered each calmly and decisively, demonstrating knowledge, foresight, and a capacity for leadership that surprised even her most experienced advisors. After the meeting, Sterling approached. Madam, you've earned the respect of everyone here. Your late husband would be proud of the leader you have become. Vesper allowed herself a small, authentic smile. She had grown from a frightened, disheveled widow into a confident, competent CEO. The empire Cassius had left her was no longer a burden. It was her domain, her responsibility, and her opportunity to honor his vision. Later that evening, she opened a report from the private investigator she had hired about Genevieve and Serafina. The sisters were living in a modest, cramped home, isolated and struggling. Vesper read it with calm neutrality. Their choices had led them to this fate. Her empathy was tempered by the knowledge that justice had been served through Cassius's careful planning, not through anger or vengeance. Standing once more by the glass walls of her London penthouse, Vesper reflected on her journey. From the cold bus ride and mud-stained dress to the Rolls-Royce and panoramic city views, every step had been a lesson in resilience, strategy, and courage. She touched the locket around her neck, a symbol of love, loss, and the bridge to her new life. The city below sparkled like a constellation of possibilities. She breathed deeply, feeling a newfound clarity and purpose. She would lead DL Global Holdings not only to financial success, but to ethical prominence. She would honor Cassius's memory through decisive, compassionate leadership. Vesper moved through her penthouse, noting the elegant furnishings, the sophisticated technology, and the office set for her work. This was not just a home, it was her command center, a space where she could envision, plan, and execute her vision for the future. Every detail reflected thoughtfulness, foresight, and a strategy that spanned continents. As night fell over London, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. Tears came, not from grief, but from release and gratitude. She had endured humiliation, loss, and fear, but she had emerged stronger, wiser, and prepared. She was no longer defined by the past or the cruelty of others. Her destiny was hers to shape. Finally, Vesper stood by the window, looking at the glowing city below, and whispered to herself, "Yes, I am." She had survived, she had learned, and she had ascended. Justice had been served not through vengeance, but through intelligence and patience. The life Cassius had asked her to live was now fully hers to embrace. In the quiet of the penthouse, the hum of the city below, and the glow of the lights reflecting on the glass, Vesper smiled, a smile of acceptance, determination, and hope. A new chapter had begun, and for the first time in her life, she truly felt the freedom and power of her own destiny. The empire was hers, the future awaited, and Vesper, once a frightened widow, now stood as its sovereign, ready to lead with wisdom, courage, and grace. And